to a new episode of the Haptics Club podcast. I'm Ashley, marketing at Titan Haptics. I'm joined by the Haptics crew, Manu from Unity, Eric and Sarah from Haptics, and Heis and Irina from Sense Glove. The Haptics Club is a team of people that have a passion for haptics. Our goal is to raise awareness of the amazing tech and people happening in haptics and to foster some interesting discussion on the subject. We're so happy to be here. It's another amazing season of the Haptics Club. We have even more surprises and excited guests. Speaking of that, right now we are joined by Dr. Margot Racat. She's professor of marketing at IDRAC Business School, associate researcher at Magdalen Research Center. If I said that right, long title, but such amazing things you're doing. You've written an amazing piece called Haptic Sensation and Consumer Behavior, and her area of expertise is, this is a really cool one. It's the influence of human senses on behavior in consumption and social environments. So we're talking retail, we're talking about human experience. Super exciting. How is this going to work? How's this going to run? As you know, there's so much to talk about. So we try to curate this into like a simple 30-minute time slot. We've got 5 minutes for an intro. We've got 15 minutes for questions on area of expertise, 10 minutes on the future. Ooh, that's always a good one. And of course, we'll cover things like challenges and opportunities in the industry. Around the 30-minute mark, that's when we stop the recording and we open up the floor to questions that people may have. And anyone who's listening now to our podcast or on YouTube, wherever you're catching this, you're going to miss out on those questions because they're not recorded. And those are sometimes the spicy fun ones. And of course, you can follow our newsletter so you'll catch our next episode. Just check us out, thehapticsclub.com. Keep it easy. Go there now, sign up for the newsletter, check out who our next guests are coming up. And of course, we're so excited to have you here. Eric, let's jump right in. Let's do this.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Ashley, for the wonderful intro as usual. I need to learn from you here. So wonderful to have you here, Margot. It's always a pleasure to see you. It's a better story, and I know Margot since quite a long time, so it will be a fun conversation here. So Margot, can you introduce yourself to our audience? Let's get to know a little bit. Tell us about your background.
Well, okay. Thank you first for having me here. And as you just said, Eric, we do work together on some projects that we know each other a little bit on. So you also know what I'm working mostly. And for the audience here, I'm a consumer researcher, and I've started a stream of research on how the senses, and especially the sense of touch, can influence people on online product evaluation at first, but now it evolved to the overall behavior and the understanding of the virtual aspect they can be interacting with from the sense of touch itself. So that's pretty much the area. And what else can I say? I started my journey with being a business school student. Maybe some of you have been doing this now. And I started this, and then I worked at L'Oréal. Maybe you know L'Oréal company. So this is where I started to dig into the marketing aspect. And I discovered over there the virtual try-on, which you may be familiar with. And these actually tools were for
Can you give us a walk through what it is actually? So it's good for our customers. What is a virtual try-on? Can you explain?
Oh, virtual try-on. Okay, what do I mean by this? It's like basically you want to try some makeup, and you have your interface, like maybe a mobile phone, maybe an iPad or something, but at least an interface. Computer as well works, and you can see yourself and test different type of product on you. So basically, instead of going in store, like in Sephora or some perfumery, sorry, I forgot the name in English, you don't try anymore the cosmetic, like let's say lipstick or eyes makeup, thing like this. You just do it online. So it means that you see it, but you don't feel it anymore from the sense of touch. And usually, at least women can say, and if men's use like cream, you understand the fact that when you put your cream on the face, you need to actually have a sensation of, is it like pleasant sensation or not, at least. And this, you can't evaluate it by the online aspect. And that was the beginning of my questioning when it was back in 2012. When they were starting with this, and I just say, okay, that's interesting that you are a cosmetic company, you want to sell product online. Of course, it's possible, but making people trying product online is something different. And so that's the beginning of the question I've been asking to myself, but also to the field. And not being able to work on this inside the company, I decided to go on the journey of a PhD, which probably many of you have been through as well. And this was a pretty good idea because we had the chance with the University of Lyon. I was there in Magellan. That's the research lab I'm also affiliated today. We've been working and investigating on these issues. And we had the chance along the way to meet some people. The last one was in 2017 with Eric at Vivatech, and that was actually very amazing. And the idea was to work on specifically in marketing, how you can use the sense of touch in virtual environment via the interfaces. So I was not really aware at this time of how the haptic works, and I'm still not exactly, so don't be too hard on me if I don't know the right terms for haptic in tech, but at least the idea was that there were many work that was done on the visual, on the audio, but not really much on the olfactory and the touch, which is kind of obvious because it's so difficult to transfer it into this environment. But the sense of touch was quite rising, and I had this questioning from L'Oréal, and I was like, okay, let's investigate it. So that's pretty much the start of this stream of research, which is now almost 10 years, I'd say, including the PhD. So that's pretty amazing. Also, what is amazing is also the evolution, I would say, but I can talk about it later, I guess. And that's pretty much it. So what I can say so far is that the main question I've been researching is how can the tactile stimulation infer diagnostic cues for the virtual content via the interfaces.
That was great. So I think you burned through a couple of three or four questions we already prepared. I always say the same things, but that's true. I feel that this closes a little bit the intro, right? So you get your background, you understand you come from L'Oréal, you get from this consumer research, this is new mediums for purchasing and new products that they have an effect on yourself, and this is digital digital experience to try them on at renounce to some senses. And this question is, how does haptics and or digital touch can help to get this experience better, or what we can do with that? I feel that's a great intro. I would love to jump in your area expertise now, just to dig into what you think what is going on in this field. And of course, you can be speculative here. We are open for your research on your papers, but what we really look forward is your insights. What you think that is going on? How do you feel that this is? What's the hidden gem over there? And even if you can prove it, it's not important. It's important for us is getting your take on that. So you mentioned before that a lot of the purchasing experience involves interacting and touching with the object, right? So that we look forward to own. But you mentioned a little bit about how is e-commerce changing this, besides touch, but in general, how is e-commerce changing this purchasing experience, and what's the trend that you are seeing here to make it more realistic or not?
Okay, you don't start with an easy question, actually. So, well, I will start with the easy way, which is based on my research, and then I will try to make some more insight, like you just asked. So basically the e-commerce itself, so it's been 20 years now since the internet that we've been in the marketing environments researching on how you can make the people purchase online and etc. So there was a lot of insight that is known that is actually possible. The new trends since probably let's say 10-15 years in marketing, I'm talking, it was about the addition of sensory input in store first, and now into the digital environment since about 5 to 10 years that has been researched. And the idea is that definitely you can buy online, everybody does that today, but you can't do the same type of purchases online and in store. And it's still the case, even though now we got some realistic visualization of product, more immersive experiences, it still remains some kind of difficult to make people purchase any kind of object, any kind of experiences. So what I would say, based on few of my researches, we, for instance, like 2 or 3 years ago, we were showing that on mobile phone, and it was with students. So even though sometimes student panel can be discussed, it's actually the young generation that is the most reliable on phone usage. And they were like preferring the sense of touch when interacting with the mobile interface for actually purchasing some grocery stores, grocery furnitures, but also perfume or cosmetic product or food products. So they had the possibility to use the voice interaction or the touch or both of them. And what we could see in the result, and we were quite surprised that actually the touch interaction was the driving one, was the most important. Even though I recently saw that there was another research that has been doing quite the same than us, and they kind of showed that the voice-based was more impacting, but I would be curious to read more on this. The idea is that voice interaction is increasing, is improving. So there is a kind of a duality between senses that I could see raising between in the field of marketing. So meaning like, yeah, voice, auditory, olfactory, and touch, that is kind of discussed. And touch is kind of raising of awareness, but still remains, I would say, like people wants to research it, wants to understand it, but still like, okay, we don't really get into it. And I have one explanation also for that, which is also the relation between the consumer researcher and the haptic industry, I'd say, but also the industry that is using this technology. And I could see that since, well, since we worked together, actually, Rick, since 2017, since I started working with you, I could understand much more, and I could see that the research aspect was really much needed on the economic value. And in marketing, we are so much, let's say, late on the understanding of what type of technology exists, but on the haptic industry, I would say you are quite late on understanding the psychological aspect of the consumption. So that's quite.
We actually have no idea. That's big. You actually have no idea. It's better saying that. So that's,
yeah. That's well, I'm being kind, so I'm trying to.
no. I mean, this podcast is known for being transparent. So.
But that's interesting that this aspect. And another thing that is very recent, I started to present it at Smart Haptics last December, but we confirmed that very recently because we finished the research, and that's some companies, well, not to name them, like Amazon, have been using the haptic for purchasing goal, where you can, with your phone, use the add to cart button and it vibrates. And we could show that for at least the young people, there is a slight difference between older generation and the youngest. And so this, we can't explain it yet because that was not in our research, but that's one of the results. The youngest are very much influenced by the haptic button itself, like when it vibrates to add to the cart, especially for the amount of purchases. So that's something I have no idea if they had this in mind when they started to implement it, but at least they are not the only one. There is also type like Lydia. I don't know if you're familiar with it. This is a banking app, and also Tinder if you use this social app, and many others. They use it very slightly, but it has an influence, and for sure it has the same type of influence than in-store, because there is many consumption research that shows that when you touch someone, for instance, on the shoulder, when you're in-store, there will be for sure more compliance, but also in a restaurant, they will be tipping more, for instance. And that's just the simple fact of being touched will make this increase. And that's, yes. Eric.
Can you share some, if you can, share some figures regarding the Amazon stuff? You have any idea more or less how much
I can share one so far because it's on the process, but I can say just like one of our results was that you had an increase of more than 35% on the amount of purchase, which is quite significant for a company. So it's
a bit more than quite significant, I think.
It is, but so it's on publication process, so I can't say a little bit more. I'm waiting for this to be official, so I can speak more on this. But for sure there is this, and also another insight that I can provide from this very recent research is that the perception aspect is very important. Like some people did not perceive the haptic and were very much influenced, which is, I would say, normal, because in the in-store physical environments is the same that happened. So there were no reason that it would not happen actually in the digital environment. But the thing is that with the interface, we would have thought that it would have been more, for the people, it would have been more easy to see it, if I can say so, to feel it and to react to it consciously. And actually, it's not the case. So there is many questions that is raised here in terms of the amount of the threshold that you use for actually stimulating.
So let me try to figure it for our listeners. Maybe you're not a specialist, and it's what are you mentioning is that if the haptics is blended into the experience and is not consciously perceived by the purchaser, so that if you ask him, did you feel the haptics, he say no, is much more effective to increase the outcome of, let's say, a purchase,
the marketing outcomes
compared to the fact that if he actually does perceive it. Correct?
Well, almost correct. It's the fact that for sure that in this case it's precise case, because we can't generalize it to
of course in this case,
but at least in these cases, and that's very like much more research is needed on this, because it's like we are back 20 years ago when we were starting to understand the sense of touch into the consumption environment. So we're pretty much at the same stage, I'd say. So
I mean, but that's extremely fascinating, because it goes back in all the work that we did with all the talks that we had with designers. Say it's the multisensory that counts, but in this case it's even more. Is the fact that if it is, even if it is multisensory, but it's too predominant, it disrupts the experience. If it's subtle and used for reinforcement, but is not predominant, then it becomes really effective. And I feel that's a huge area to explore.
Yeah, and there is a second thing that might surprise you then. The second part of this result is also that when they actually perceive it, it also increased the purchase amount. So this was not expected for us. So that's something.
More or less?
A little bit less, but still. And still significant. I can't say more for now, but that's also something that is interesting. So there is this perception aspect that is very interesting to dig into. And it, being a researcher and with all the RGPD, all things, I need to say it. I mean, you need to be careful with the ethical aspect, but this is not necessarily just the haptic industry. It's also the brands in itself. Like they need to be careful on why and how you stimulate, because probably like you all know that the sense of touch is the most intimate senses that we have, and it has a huge influence on people. I mean, you can influence anybody to make a decision in one sense or the other according to the way you will touch the person. So the haptic interface as well has been the mobile phone, especially for now, is one of the interfaces that has been shown also to be the most intimate interface to people. And so having the stimulation on the mobile phone has a huge impact on individuals, and especially youngers, I guess, because also the youngers are, if we take the people who are 20 years old-ish today, they are the one who have been growing with this type of technologies somehow. So, and even more for the next generation, of course, but it's a bit different. So they don't know what is the relation to, and that's also one of the research I'm running on. There is a difference of perception between the fact of touching someone with the digital environment and with the people who have been living within the digital environment as we know it today. So some people just probably the youngest relate to the sense of touch much more. And that's why it has such a huge impact on the 35% increase in purchase amount at the youngest, because they have this intimate relation in terms of touch with the interface that people, I mean, me, for instance, I don't have this intimate relationship because I've been growing without it. So that's questionable in terms of many aspects for consumption. But as we talk about purchasing behavior, ethic needs to be also considered, because we're not just here to, in a medical environment, we're not here to help people to heal from something. We're here to make people purchase at the end. So it's a question that it needs to be addressed at some point.
I do agree that one, because I mean, in haptics, maybe we already discussed this. I mean, with audio, people don't ever, like 90% of it, don't use sound when they are doing shoppings, right? It's because you don't put your headphones, or you're doing it on the metro, so you don't do that. You don't listen to the sounds. However, there is, and you also can decide to reduce the volume of your sound.
I was about to talk about this.
You can't now, in haptics, you cannot adjust it to your preference level. And you cannot have the conscious, let's say, input for your application, say, no, I don't want to receive a vibration notification from you.
And that's another point I was going to raise as well, and glad you introduced it, is the fact that another solution on this, and it implies also an overload and overstimulation that needs to be taken into consideration as well, because the possibility, if it's given to the consumer to actually turn off or turn on this vibration, it might be even more efficient in the future, because the choice is given, but also because of this overload and overstimulation that happens sometimes. If you relate to the research we've been running together, Eric, for instance, we do have probably this effect that is ongoing. When we were making people interacting with one product online with the haptic interface, they were having contradictory results and sometimes opposite to what we were thinking and opposite to some research I had done a few years before. And we have this assumption that it's actually based on overloading or overstimulation. So this possibility to turn off and on might be also more than just ethical issue, but also useful for the purchase environment, because let's say tomorrow you have your website and you can say to the people, instead of providing directly the haptic, you can say, if you want to test somehow how it could feel, let's say we can just completely realistically reproduce texture. If you were saying this, the people could turn on the possibility and say, okay, I want to feel it. So the person will be even more receptive to it. And it doesn't mean that the people who don't choose it won't be, but at least there is a choice, conscious choice about being stimulated on the sense of touch. So that's another point indeed that is, I think, something also to consider in terms of purchasing environment again.
I feel this is more general, but it does makes a lot of sense in this direction. I do believe that conscious choice is the most important here, and today we don't have it, specifically in Amazon and the other environments, let's say.
If I can say also something more before you jump on your other question, maybe the haptic imagery as well is, I guess I don't say something new to you as well, but haptic imagery is also something very important, because one also colleagues just released some research on not using any haptic interfaces, but they use in virtual reality setting the haptic imagery itself, and they show how much this also trigger exactly the same way.
Can you please explain better what you mean with haptics imagery? Is a pseudo haptics? What is this?
Haptic imagery is based on the fact that you have this internal memorization of your senses that is interacting, and it evolves along the time, along your experiences, and you learn some new type of experiences, you store them, then you can reproduce them mentally, but also use it for another experience that is not directly related. And
can you make an example, practical?
Let's say you go in store and you want to buy a blanket. You just go in store, you touch it, and you compare some, and etc. So you have this experience that is recorded by your system, and then you want to buy it online, let's say, and you see it and you have very good visual representation of it, but you can't feel it by your sense of touch directly. It can actually, and does, it does trigger actually your sense of touch the same way than it could be if you were in store touching it, because you have such a good memorization of the sensation it provided, and you understand the concept, because it's not only about seeing it, it's also about, if you say it's a wool blanket, then seeing on the website is description is being wool, then you will make a reference and you will retrieve and reenact the sensation that you used to have in store when you were touching it. And so it helps you to buy it, no matter the fact that you can touch it or not. So haptic imagery is also very important, and that's also one of the reasons the overload and overstimulation might also be in consideration here, because if you stimulate directly the sense of touch, plus the visual, plus the auditory, plus the olfactory, but also your system is able to actually retrieve and reenact some previous sensation to understand your experience, or to understand the product you are touching, then maybe there will be something that is too much confusing, too much for the consumer, and then it's a reject. In the end, the people, when this is too much, just say, okay, no, stop it. I don't want this anymore.
Yeah, makes sense. So Yeah, thanks for the full dive here. It was a great ride. So I feel that you give a good picture about the aspects, the problems, and what are the early results and what are you going to work on. And I think it's definitely super exciting. And I would love to pass the mic here to Ashley for our most popular section. Up to you.
Awesome. All right. So how do you expect e-commerce to change with immersive technologies and haptics? You've kind of covered a little bit, but we want to like drill down to one kind of like key thought. Where do you think it's going to go?
So just to make sure I understand your question, do you ask if the haptic will change the e-commerce or if the e-commerce will make the haptics to be more visible?
If e-commerce will change with immersive technologies. So like because of haptics or because of technologies.
Okay. So what was interesting, I just came back from Vivatech 2022, and if some of you were there, like it was very interesting to see that the number of company that was there for immersive experiences and haptic and etc. was increasing, and also very much confusing because everybody was kind of talking about metaverse and everything, and they wanted to say, okay, we need to be there, we have to do something, because the big names like Zuckerberg and everyone just say that it has to be, but nobody kind of understands it so far. I mean, we all know that. And so that was interesting, this confusion, but still people wants to go there. The big brands as well, LVMH and also L'Oreal, they had this huge booths that was actually showing many immersive experiences for product trial in immersive experiences for commerce. And I think it will change. I mean, for sure, it will change if the sensation is provided into this environment. But the immersive aspect, I'm not sure the haptics is completely necessary as an input. It's something that will help for sure. It's all about the strategy that you give to the haptic as well. If it's just for fun, if it's just an immersive experience that is here to make people play and everything, then the more you will stimulate the senses, probably the best the experience will be, because then you are feeling like you completely disappear into this environment instead of being in the physical realities, let's say. If it's for shopping goals, let's say, again, like I just started to talk about, you may have to say, okay, what will the haptic do for the consumption into this virtual shop, for instance, or maybe into between person, because you have the interpersonal touch that exists, or Midas touch, some people call it as well like this. And you have this interaction that is not really possible so far, even though there is many jacket. I've seen some example into Vivatech, but that was also another fair. So it started to be again, but then what's the goal of the haptic? And this will be obviously helping to immerse the person for sure. But then it's also the question, to what extent you want the person to be off the ground, let's say, and or back to the reality, how you make them coming back and etc. So I don't know if this answers the question, but for sure it's part of it. For sure there is many enthusiasm for that. I'm a little bit skeptical on the way it will be done, because it sounds like it's going in many directions without any guidance. That's what I can observe.
In terms of, were there any companies or things at the show that like stood out to you that were maybe more future forward than you expected to see? Just because a lot of people didn't have a chance to be at that show. I know I didn't.
Yes, I think I've noticed some. Just let me find.
You came prepared. That's good.
No,
Yeah,
because
it,
that
yeah.
was for something else. It was not for today, actually. But I noticed them for some other reason. But yeah, well, there is one company, I can't recall the name, but there is one. Where is it? There is one company that was very surprising, but not surprising because it's in Japan that they have set up this. It's completely a bit different from your question, but it's still a basis for that. They have implemented like mid-hair cash out. So the people now can use the cash out that is just mid-hair based, and it's just feel like you just touch the air and that's it. And for consumption is kind of revolutionizing.
Wait. Are they using mid-air haptics like ultra haptic stuff, or is without anything?
Without any feedback. And that's set up, and it's now in Japan, and they want to integrate France. So that's why we were talking as well. They want to make some research in France for that, because for sure the French people are not ready for that. I can tell that. But the idea is, this is a good example of how some companies are very much visionary as well, in terms of they just understood that you need to go on the small and little things to make people to be actually prepared and better also able to adapt for more immersive experiences. And I think one observation I can make as well is that some people are too far away and they don't think enough on the consumer market at the moment, so the time to market, let's say. And this is more like they want so much to be in the future that they forget that people in their daily life, they can't be that much in that future, and they need to learn. You need to educate the people for sure, and if you give them a new experiences, you need to educate them, but at least once it's done, it's over. I mean, you don't need to do it again, and it's integrated, and it's also integrated into the general culture at some point. So I'd say what amazed me over there was probably a few companies, but I'd like to find back the name. I have them here. Yeah, I have them here. Sorry. They were like this company, maybe you heard of it. I put it on my LinkedIn. Oh, well, if you want to know some of the company that amazed me, you have it on the LinkedIn. I posted something and I listed some of them. But one was sorry if I don't say it right, but it's Xil Tech. Some of you may know them, I guess.
Yeah, we do.
Panek.
Yeah.
The technology was kind of amazing for me because it's just like with one button, you can make people feel different type of sensation. And for consumption, I guess this is very much something of that can be very useful in the future.
What did they show? They showed the rotary control, right? So for who doesn't know them, Tech is they use rotary active force feedback, passive and active force feedback together. I think they use a rheological material as well as servo systems so that they can control in real time how much force a rotary control gives you back. So I feel you have something like that in some BMW, top level BMW, they use it in automotive, but it's definitely something interesting for other applications.
And a few others is completely something different, but it's called Instrument of Things, the name of the company. It's a young startup and they are made of 3 people for now, but they have invented this bracelet that is able to capture the movement, and they can reintegrate it into the immersive the online environment. So it can create it can also be used to make the people to teach a dance movement, for instance. So they do it in the music environment, the arts environment for now, but also for the consumption in more general and the metaverse itself and all this very non-physical environment. It has this very interesting way because it's so simple. It's just a bracelet and you can have the reproduction of what you're doing exactly the way you want to. And so it's probably the most realistic interaction that you had with a very simple device for consumption, I would say, from a consumption
and intuitive. Oh, very cool. That's awesome. So we'll link your LinkedIn so folks can maybe take a look at the other things you saw that were going on. That's awesome. Thanks for that. I want to zoom back out a little bit and think more about the future an integrator sense. So it's like, where do you think haptics and marketing is going to go within the next like 5 to 10 years? So we're looking like, bigger picture.
Well, with a bigger picture, first, you need some collaboration for sure. That's if you want to be like actually existing, both of them, I mean, marketing and the haptic industry, I guess, for the consumption market, more than the gaming, more than the automotive. I mean, there is a few fields you are already set up, but I'd say when I talk about consumer market, is more about the retail environments and the cosmetic area, but not only. Collaboration is needed because what I can say is that there is many research, many companies that implement things, many research that try to understand the phenomenon, but they don't communicate. And that's also one observation that I made with Manuel, and we are working on something that to make some kind of common understanding, to make people to try to join to each other. And I think the future of the haptic industry, the future of marketing together can be with this association, and big groups like, again, I'm giving the example of L'Oréal, but this is because they are so amazing on innovation for the cosmetic and consumer goods industry. They just make it like easy to associate. But the fact is that it's so hard sometimes to get the big names. So the small, I could see there is many small industry in the haptics, and those people actually are the most interesting for the marketers as well, because it's reachable, it's easy to talk to, but you need to do it. And another thing that might be complicated from my perspective is that there is so many technology that exists in haptic. This is kind of confusing. Like I was telling you at the beginning of Ashley, it's like having your newsletter on the understanding of all what is happening in the haptic industry, but also what type of technology exists. And I can discover a few. When I don't know them, I can go through it. It's so much that is not for a marketer, for someone who is not from the field, it's a bit confusing. It's too much. So this is there is a need of kind of collaboration for understanding each other, I would say, in any case. And I would bet that actually the haptic industry will have a huge impact on the next, but it will also take, from my idea and my perspective, another change in the type of interfaces we use. Like the smartphone for me is dead already, but we need to. It's been 5 years, it's been dead to me, but it's just like we need to understand what is the next interface for all of this. So that's my point of view. And the haptics industry is, I think, the next input for changing the game on this.
We have some ideas from Meta. So they are the bracelets. That's me. That looks like what they like. And Apple has the nail-mounted haptics interface that looks good, so I'm quite excited. So let's see who will win the, let's say, input war in mixed reality. We'll see. Great feedback, Ashley, to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think bold statement to end on. Yeah,
but just something, because
yeah.
you're thinking of something like with the Meta things. The Meta booth in Vivatech, they were like this Ray-Ban, I think you have seen it, the Ray-Ban glasses. With one of my colleagues, we were expecting to be AR type of or something like much more advanced. And in the end, we just tried and was like, oh, that's just it. That's just the beginning of the phone, like in 2005, like the first version of, okay, that's exactly the same. So what's the point? I mean, from a consumer perspective, I'd say there is no real, there is a market for sure. I mean, there will always be a market, but what's the point knowing that what a phone can do today? And there is such a gap of like distance in terms of the beginning of it. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's an example of something that should not be really like happening on a market, I'd say. I mean, this is not going to be the groundbreaking innovation for sure.
I mean, what they said, and they will be using that to gather data, actually.
Yeah, so, not surprising.
That's what they said.
This is scary, and this is coming with the ethical also consideration I was talking about at the beginning. Like this actually scared me on this aspect. Even though this little light that actually says that you are recorded, but you don't have it when you take a picture.
No, you don't. No, you don't. I mean, that's meta for you. That's what it is. So yeah, I mean, you're laughing, but that's
yeah.
That's
this is turning into a conversation we can talk about for at least another half an hour. Unfortunately,
we need to close here.
Yeah, we need to close. It's getting spicy. It's getting real spicy. But I think, Margot, is there like a place where people can find you, learn more about what you're working on? Because you have an area of expertise that is also like very dense, and there's like a lot to cover. Like, where can people find more and learn more about you and what you're up to?
Well, I do have, if you're aware of ResearchGate, that is quite well. I put all the research on it, and well, I just use LinkedIn and Twitter mostly. So if you need to reach out, you just have my name here, so you can just shoot me a message.
Perfect. And your Twitter handle is at Margot _BB.
Yeah, exactly.
So there we go. So go there. Perfect. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. You did an amazing job at kind of giving us a glimpse of like the current state of things, as well as a bit into the future, which I really love. There's just like so much more we could dive into, but jumping back in, we've reached this kind of like halfway mark, and we'll stop the recording. The Q&A will start. So anyone who's here that wants to ask a question, raise your hand and we'll bring on stage. But this has been an epic Haptics Club, another amazing discussion. And we've kind of expanded the topic range, and we're really trying to capture both like technical, scientific, academia, automotive, like all the areas, because they're all exciting. And I think to your point, there's a lot of potential collaboration and ways that we can work together to really cool things. As a reminder to folks, you can stay on top of our guests and our announcements on Twitter at Haptics Club. We've got our newsletter in the bio. And of course, you can check out our website, thehapticsclub.com, to keep it simple. On our next episode, number 27, we'll be talking about digital music instruments and tactile feedback with Samantha Mink. And of course, you can catch our podcast on every platform. It's everywhere: Spotify, Apple, wherever you want to go, you can find it. And we also have a new link on our website, I should mention, for Ko-Fi, where you can give us a tip, give us some coffee to keep having these epic conversations, keep us caffeinated, so we can continue forward. But that's it for the Haptics Club. Thank you so much for joining us.